Welcome everyone to my top 10 worst / most disappointing games of 2015. 2015 had a lot of hyped games that lived up to my expectations, and also had a few surprises that came out of nowhere to make 2015 a great year for gaming. But there was plenty of bad, and worse, there were some really disappointing experiences that I was really excited for going into 2015. So without further ado, let's get to the top 10 worst / most disappointing games of 2015.
Number 10.
Metal Gear Solid 5 has the distinction of being not only on my best games of 2015, but also on my most disappointing list as well. The game completely falls apart in the second half. I was already having plenty of issues with a lot of missions feeling like they really didn't truly matter to the plot. But then, things started to get really good around the late 20s in the missions. But then that second half kicks in and you're doing repeated missions. Not just similar, but actually repeated missions. Then you get to the very end and find out there's a lot of plot holes. In fact, the final mission was completely cut from the game. The falling out between Kojima and Konami leaves Metal Gear Solid 5 feeling like an unfinished product. And being a huge Metal Gear fan, and this potentially being the final game, especially with Kojima now working with his own company and working with Sony, it just makes Metal Gear Solid 5 even more disappointing.
Number 9.
The zombie genre is well overplayed, but I was still excited to get my hands on Dying Light, even though it was being done by the same developers as Dead Island, and I was disappointed by that game quite a lot. I was still willing to give this game a try. It seemed like it was going to try to do something new and different, but in the end all it was Dead Island with a darker coat of paint on it. There were some exciting moments, don't get me wrong. When it first went to night and I was being chased by a horde of zombies, the adrenaline definitely got pumping, but that initial charm wore off quickly. Then the story started to progress, and it was really lackluster, with some of the worst characters in a game I played all year long. There was fetch quest over and over again, running to the same basic radar towers and then returning, and the side quest being even worse than the main quest, with heavy emphasis on loot gathering, where you could stomp a zombie 30 times and they not die, but one hit from a random shovel was able to do the job. Just took me out of the experience. It also featured one of the worst final bosses in modern gaming. Maybe not Fable 2 level bad, but it was really bad. You also have co-op, but you can't even do co-op with the final mission of the game, so after playing the entire game with friends, and then getting to that very end, it was disappointing that I couldn't experience that final segment with the people I've been playing the entire game with. Overall, Dying Light may not be the worst zombie game by any means, but it was disappointing as I was expecting a lot more.
Number 8.
One of the big stories of 2014 was the very quick meteoric rise of the small independent horror game known as Five Nights at Freddy's. And over the course of a year, it released 4 games, and the fandom was chomping at the bit to get a hold of every little tiny thing that the creator was able to throw out. And I never aboard the hype train whatsoever, but I did play through the games and actually really enjoyed Five Nights 2. And I found it a challenging and fun experience to figure out how things worked and be able to progress farther into the game. However, Five Nights 3 comes out, and it was just a colossal disappointment, with some of the worst jump scares that the series can offer. And being a series that's pretty much only built on jump scares, this was a major downside to the game. It also featured really only one killing animatronic, and the camera system was pretty convoluted, even for a game series that really isn't all that intriguing or in-depth. Overall, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 just was a disappointment.
Number 7.
Two things that I really enjoy are adventure games, the old school ones like Monkey Island or Maniac Mansion, more modern day ones like the Telltale Walking Dead series, or the recently released Frambeau, which is one of my favorite independent release games of 2015. Heck, even the Goosebumps game I played was actually pretty good. So I was excited because I also really love Adventure Time, and they were going to combine these two into an adventure game. But what I ended up getting was a very short and really lackluster put together adventure game. It was cool, don't get me wrong, seeing the characters in 3D, it was some good voice acting and some funny, charming moments, but there was no replayability, you couldn't fail any of the puzzles, you got no penalty whatsoever for talking to the wrong characters. It also had one of the worst combat systems. There was no need to add combat to this style of game, but I guess they felt they needed to try to keep kids interested, but it just took away from the experience. In an adventure game, one thing that makes it fun is good storytelling, great characters, and when it comes to the items and puzzle solving, they have to be intuitive. Having no penalty and no different ways to solve anything or dialogue choices that really changed up anything whatsoever just makes for a very short, very dull experience that you're probably never gonna want to play again.
Number 6.
I was so excited for the new Godzilla game, I even imported it from Japan in order to play with some of my friends that are also big Godzilla fans. And when the PlayStation 4 version was coming out, I had to support the release, mostly just because of my fandom for Godzilla. But the charm of the game, of getting to see the giant kaiju monsters from Toho on a PlayStation 4 in HD on a big screen, that novelty wore off so fast. It has one of the worst story modes, it doesn't have a lot of different kinds of gameplay. I mean, the story mode just has you going through random parts of Japan and just breaking down the same buildings over and over again. And they try to mask the limited amount of maps by having you do the same maps, but maybe at daytime or nighttime or evening time. Either way, it just started to get boring within the first playthrough, and the game's only about a half an hour to an hour to get through the initial story mode. And there are unlockables, and there's a lot of playable Godzilla creatures in the game. Getting to see Mothra and Rodan, Mechagodzilla, Destroya, and of course King Ghidorah, and getting to actually play as them and destroy parts of Japan was fun for 5 or 10 minutes or so. But then I wanted to battle my friends using the monsters, and it has some of the worst combat. The Nintendo Wii Godzilla game was much more enjoyable to play with friends. This game is just a very extremely boring button masher with only a couple of moves per creature, and with some of the smaller ones being almost unhittable by the bigger kaiju monsters. Overall, Godzilla was just a very boring, disappointing game that, unfortunately, I wish was just an overall extremely boring game that I have a really hard time recommending even to hardcore Godzilla fans.
Number 5.
Tied for number 5 is Mario Party 10 and Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. The number one biggest complaint is they're so full of Amiibo support. The best part about Mario Party 10 was the Amiibo Party board. However, it was just a single board that was just a square, and you're forced to use the Amiibos the whole time. And with Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, which we knew going in was going to be very Amiibo heavy, I wasn't expecting to be as heavy as it ended up being. Not only do you need the figures, but also to unlock a lot of the minigames, which aren't even part of the main game. They're side content that you get to from the main menu, and not even right away. You have to unlock the ability to even do so by playing a few games of the main game. But they're locked behind Amiibo trading cards. It's bad enough the hype has gotten so big with Amiibos, and don't get me wrong, I've bought plenty myself, but they also have Amiibo cards now. On the Mario Party side of things, it's still the whole car scenario that they added from Mario Party 9. Gone are the days of stealing stars and coins on the very last turn of a giant big board after playing 50 or so turns. Now you're relegated to a car that moves along a linear track. They did add the really cool Bowser minigames, but there's so few of them that even got boring really fast, as after only a game or two we were already experiencing the games for the third, fourth, fifth time overall. I really wish that Nintendo would just go back to the old ways of party games, filled with fun boards and mini games. What made the party games on the N64, the GameCube, the Nintendo Wii a lot of fun, instead of this amiibo-filled bore fest that is both Mario Party 10 and Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival.
Number 4.
No game got more bad press or controversy than Hatred during the course of 2015. This is an extremely violent experience that people were blowing way out of proportion. I don't care about violence in games or sex in games. If it's a strong-made game and a well-put-together game, I don't care exactly what's going on. It could be a plot about knitting, but if it's really well put together, it's going to be an awesome gaming experience. Hatred just used its violent initial trailer to get all this hype and all this controversy behind it so that everyone would try to buy it or at least talk about it when it finally hit the Steam PC sales. The problem is, the game is the trailer. It's extremely boring. You've seen all the best animations overall from the very first level of the game, and the gameplay doesn't change up. It has some of the worst twin-stick shooting I've experienced on a modern system, and I love a good twin-stick shooter, like the old-school like Smash TV games, or even getting to do it in the more recent games like Binding of Isaac is a lot of fun. Hatred is a snooze fest. The violence, of course, didn't shock me by any means, as I've seen worse in modern day on the internet or in other video games and movies. But overall, you made a poor game, and you piggybacked off controversy without delivering at least a somewhat interesting product. Grand Theft Auto, Hatred is not.
Number 3.
I'm one of those odd cases that actually enjoys playing through bad games, like a moth to a flame. I just have to see if a game is truly as bad as people are making it out to be. One game that I haven't heard anything about, which I guess is a good thing because no one bought it, is Skyscrapers on the PlayStation 4. It's available elsewhere as well, but this is one of the worst games, not only on the PSN, but one of the worst fighting games I've played in modern gaming. It features only 4 playable characters, like 3 playable stages, with a story mode, arcade mode that lasts 6 or 7 total matches with very minimalistic comic book style storytelling. The characters' designs aren't really all that bad, but they're kind of stereotypical, and we've seen the same exact style characters in other games. Each character has a unique weapon, but they all attack the exact same, with one button press being used for all attacks in the game. Every character does have a special move, but it's the exact same special move for every single character. Also playing through the game, there was bugs and glitches. I ended up falling through the ground on a couple of occasions and going into the abyss below. It does have an okay gimmick of not only being able to take out your opponents with their health bars, but also climbing this massive tower that's falling apart as you're climbing up, and whoever reaches the top of the tower first ends up being the winner. But the AI is so poorly programmed, if you just start climbing up the tower, they always end up lagging behind and get killed as they end up falling off the screen. Overall, Skyscrapers is one of not only the worst fighting games, but one of the worst games available on PS4, and it has the audacity to charge $14.99 for the experience. Now, I could understand if the game was on PC on Steam for $1 or $2 or even free, but it's inexcusable, the price tag on this game and what you end up getting out of it. But if you like an easy platinum, that's about the only thing this game has going for it.
Number 2.
Now, I know for some people, Batman Arkham Knight is going to be their favorite game of 2015, and I didn't even play the PC version, so I can't even speak of that colossal debacle of a release. But as a Batman fan, and as a fan of the previous Arkham games, Arkham Knight was a huge disappointment. The story mode wasn't what I was expecting, with even the most novice of Batman fans pretty much figuring out where things were going to end up leading to. We were promised original characters and different villains than we had seen in previous games, but in the end, it's still a giant Joker love fest. I love the Joker, but he's been the headlining character for the previous Arkham games, so I was expecting a new villain to take control. And there are some great moments with Scarecrow scattered throughout the game, and there are some great dialogue between Batman and Joker throughout the experience, but it wasn't enough. The overuse of the Batmobile cannot be overstated. Almost the most basic of puzzle solving had to involve the Batmobile. It was pretty much any time in the game where I was stuck or didn't know exactly where to go. The answer was always, get the Batmobile. It somehow needs to grapple hook over here from outside the building and somehow hit something, and then I can finally move and progress just that little bit farther. One thing that could have saved the game was side villains, but all those villains were lackluster and put into the game. The missions were very dull. There was no epic boss encounters. Even with the final big villains of the game, there was almost no epic bosses to be seen. The game is a bit better now since I played the recently released DLC Season of Infamy, and had that been in the initial release, Arkham Knight would have been a much better game. But for its core, I can't help but be disappointed with Arkham Knight. This is a terrible way for Rocksteady to end the Arkham series, and overall, I have to say I ended up liking Arkham Origins a little bit more, and that game honestly wasn't that good.
And the number one worst game of 2015 is...
Oh boy, did I call this one. Afro Samurai 2 is by far the worst game I have played in 2015. From its less than 2-hour run length, being broken up episodically, with us never going to be able to see episodes 2 or 3 due to the game being so bad, they canceled the later episodes and are even refunding people for this game. Glitches and terrible hack and slash combat that wouldn't have even been acceptable back in the early 2000s. I was falling through the ground, dying for absolutely no reason whatsoever. The game ends completely abruptly out of almost nowhere because it was trying to cliffhanger into the next episode that, like I said, is canceled. We're never going to see it. The only redeeming factor that this game has is its soundtrack, and after that wears off, you're going to be just sitting there in awe of just how much they could screw up the development and release of this title. It's a follow-up to the original Afro Samurai, which wasn't a bad game. It had some charm to it, some interesting things, and overall was an okay game, even at its worst. This game craps on anything that game had going for it, and presents the player with one of the worst gaming experiences they can get on a modern system. And now, they can't even, as the game has been pulled from the PlayStation Store and other gaming services. Do yourself a favor, even if you can somehow play this game, just don't do it. There is no reason to play Afro Samurai 2 Kuma's Revenge whatsoever. So there we have my worst / most disappointing games of 2015. I'm sure there's a couple of games on here that you may have actually enjoyed. Be sure to comment down below and let me know which ones on the list that you wouldn't have included. What games didn't make the list that were really awful to you or were really disappointing. And I've always said a disappointing game that you're hyped for is always significantly worse than a game that's just an overall bad game that you expected nothing from. Hopefully 2016 I won't even need to do a top 10 worst games, as every game will live up to expectations and be an amazing experience. But I doubt that's going to happen. But with that, that will wrap up this top 10 list for worst games of the year. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.